Welcome to Spaceverse, your portal to cosmic adventures. It started with a flicker, a quiet shimmer in the black on August 6, 2025, a day that began like any other inside a sterile lab under the hum of fluorescent lights, and ended with humanity staring into the unknown. The James Webb Space Telescope, humanity's most powerful eye on the cosmos, suddenly entered emergency override, not because of a supernova tearing through a distant galaxy, not because of a black hole awakening from cosmic sleep, but because of something much closer and infinitely stranger. At first, it appeared innocent, a faint blur of light, tumbling silently through the void. Astronomers cataloged it with routine precision. 3I Atlas, a newly discovered comet from the outer reaches of interstellar space. Cold, distant, harmless. But then the data began to change. Spectral readings came back fragmented, shifting in ways that no natural object ever should. Its composition defied chemistry: no carbon, no ice, no dust, just a smooth, perfect surface that reflected starlight like a mirror. And beneath that surface, something flickered. At first, they thought it was interference. Then they realized it was a pattern, pulses of light, rhythmic, deliberate. A message? Or something watching back? The algorithm screamed with errors. Instruments failed one after another, and what they saw on the final transmission wasn't just unusual, it was impossible. Webb's instruments caught something no comet had ever shown before: an atmosphere alive with carbon dioxide 8 times more than water. Normal comets barely reach 0.7. Even the legendary Borisov, our last interstellar visitor, didn't break 0.5. This one was off the charts, and the coma, that glowing halo of gas, wasn't full of dust and debris. It was too clean, controlled, precise, as if it was engineered to vent that gas. Then came the metals. Webb detected strong, steady emissions of nickel, but no iron at all. That's not supposed to happen, ever. In nature, nickel and iron are inseparable, born together in the hearts of stars. But in 3I Atlas, nickel dominated by over 40-1, the kind of separation that, on Earth, requires industrial machinery and intent. Then the impossible got worse. Tracking networks noticed something eerie. 3I Atlas was accelerating, not by gravity, not by sunlight, but by choice. It was far too cold, too distant, too dead for natural propulsion, yet its velocity kept climbing, slow but steady. A gentle, deliberate push, 0.12 meters per second squared, for an object the size of a city. That was like watching a mountain begin to drift across the sky. And it wasn't smooth. It pulsed. It shivered as though something deep within it was waking up or remembering how to move. Every 7.2 hours, its brightness spiked. Not randomly, not like a tumbling rock catching sunlight, but with precision, a rhythm, steady and patient. The pulse repeated, unwavering, for days. Then the intervals began to change. Subtle at first, a fraction of a second longer, then shorter. A pattern, one that didn't fit any natural rotation, precession, or known physical behavior. Radio observatories turned their dishes toward it, hoping for static, for noise, for anything. Instead, they got silence. Not the absence of sound, but the presence of something that refused to be heard. And all the while, 3I Atlas kept accelerating, toward the inner system, toward us. Like a lighthouse in space. No comet behaves like that. No rock spins with that kind of precision. This wasn't random rotation, it was clockwork. When the strange readings became undeniable, a global alert went out. Observatories everywhere dropped their schedules. At 2:11 GMT, the Webb Control Center activated a rare mission override, a move so drastic it had only happened a few times in history. Minutes later, the telescope turned its golden eye toward the anomaly, and what came through the feed sent a ripple through every control room on Earth. This wasn't ice and dust. This was chemistry far too extreme for anything natural. Ratios so unnatural, metals so selectively separated, that one question began to rise, quietly at first, then louder, like a storm behind the stars. What if this wasn't formed? What if it was built? And that's when the oldest mystery of all resurfaced. For centuries, humanity has spoken of iron from the sky, the metal of heaven used by ancient civilizations to forge relics that shouldn't exist. King Tut's dagger, Babylonian beads, Sumerian charms, all rich in nickel, all nearly free of iron. Just like 3I Atlas, the pattern, the same high nickel signature, wasn't new. It had appeared before, scattered across history, long before we had the tools to recognize it. Traces of identical alloys had been found in archaeological sites, in fragments of metal tools and ornaments that predated the Iron Age by thousands of years. Most were dismissed as anomalies, pieces of meteorites smelted by ancient cultures, or contamination from later periods. But the data never quite fit those explanations. The composition ratios were too consistent, too deliberate. When modern spectroscopy became advanced enough to compare the readings, the similarities became impossible to ignore. The same isotopic ratios, the same impurities, the same strange reflectivity profile that didn't match any known terrestrial source. Over time, researchers noticed a repeating pattern embedded in the materials themselves, not just chemical, but structural, as if the crystal lattice had been engineered to resonate in a specific frequency range. The pattern kept turning up. In meteorite fragments, in polished stones from burial chambers, even in atmospheric samples collected by early satellites, showing traces of high nickel particles far above expected concentrations. It was subtle, but present and always the same. That consistency became harder to write off after the Webb incident. When 3I Atlas appeared, its spectral analysis returned an exact match. Same nickel to iron ratio, same anomalous trace elements, same interference in the emission spectrum. Whatever this material was, it wasn't unique to a single event. It had been here before. Could these artifacts be remnants of something that passed through the solar system long ago? Maybe even something that entered our atmosphere? A visitor that left fragments behind, pieces that ancient civilizations found, used, or worshipped without ever knowing what they were? 2 weeks after the Webb blackout, teams at Caltech were still combing through corrupted data packets from the telescope sensors. Most of it was static and thermal drift, but one analyst noticed a recurring fluctuation buried deep in the infrared readings. It wasn't strong enough to stand out to automated filters, but once isolated, the pattern was clear. It pulsed. Not randomly, rhythmically. It wasn't radio, and it wasn't a cosmic background artifact. The intervals between pulses followed a mathematical sequence, prime number spacing, Fibonacci intervals, and harmonic ratios that mirrored geometric progressions. There was no carrier wave, no modulation to decode, just a structure. It wasn't a message. There was no syntax, no data packet, no modulation pattern that could be interpreted as language. It was a fingerprint. Something identifiable but not communicative, like the residue of a process or the repeating byproduct of a specific technology. The same fingerprint that showed up in ancient metals, in lunar samples, and now in the emissions from an object accelerating through interplanetary space. The conclusion was uncomfortable but simple. Whatever 3I Atlas was, it wasn't unique. And it wasn't the first time it had been here. A signature woven into the object's behavior itself. When scientists converted it into sound, the pattern came alive, steady, deliberate, alien. And if we could hear it, someone else could too. Within days, Earth's magnetic field began to twitch. Sensors in Antarctica, Argentina, and Australia all picked up identical ultra-low frequency pulses, every 7.2 hours, perfectly matching the rhythm of 3I Atlas. Coincidence? Maybe, but the odds say otherwise. Because somewhere out there, an object that shouldn't exist is spinning, accelerating, and watching. And for the first time in history, our most advanced telescope had to admit the one thing science dreads most. We don't know what it is, but it knows we're here. The pulses weren't storms. They weren't lightning. They didn't come from the skies above, but from inside the Earth. Sensors all over the planet started catching something impossible, rhythmic tremors that matched the thermal frequencies hidden in 3I Atlas's emissions. Something deep beneath us had started to resonate, not violently, but in perfect time, like a tuning fork catching the hum of a forgotten melody. The thought was almost worse than danger itself. What if this wasn't new? What if the Earth has heard this frequency before, and whatever once slept beneath our crust had just remembered? When scientists plotted the object's trajectory, another truth emerged, one that shattered every model of celestial mechanics. 3I Atlas wasn't drifting, it was navigating. Its path through the solar system didn't just obey gravity, it avoided it, threading neatly between planets, dodging gravitational wells with surgical precision, as though it were following a flight plan. When NASA's trajectory simulators ran the latest data, the results were difficult to dispute. The orbital path of 3I Atlas wasn't random, it was deliberate. The computed vectors matched 92.6% with the engineered slingshot trajectories used by human spacecraft during interplanetary missions. The acceleration curves, course corrections, and timing all follow the logic of controlled navigation. It was moving with intent. The destination was even harder to explain. The projected route led toward a narrow corridor just beyond Saturn's outer orbit, a region long considered a gravitational dead zone. For decades, models had predicted a subtle balancing point there, a neutral pocket where the pulls of Saturn, Jupiter, and the Sun nearly canceled each other out. A mathematical curiosity, nothing more. But the new data suggested otherwise. Small distortions in local field readings hinted that the area wasn't completely empty. Infrared scans from older probes had shown inconsistent temperature gradients, and magnetometer readings recorded brief, inexplicable spikes. Nothing that warranted attention at the time. Now viewed in context, it looked intentional, like a set of coordinates waiting to be used. Some at JPL started calling it the Gateway. A few even suggested it wasn't just a gravitational phenomenon, but possibly an entry vector, a transition point. To what, no one could say. 3I Atlas was heading straight for it. It wasn't tumbling like a comet, and it wasn't following a ballistic path. Its orientation remained fixed, its spin stable, its thrust consistent. Every model, every reading pointed to the same conclusion. It was leaving on purpose. Then, without warning, everything changed. Roughly 16 hours before Webb's next scheduled observation, the infrared readings began to drop. At first, it looked like sensor drift, a calibration issue. But as multiple observatories confirmed the data, it became clear the decline was real. Nickel emissions fell below detection thresholds. Carbon dioxide outflow, which had been steady for weeks, started tapering off, then ceased entirely. Reflectivity readings fluctuated, as if the object's surface temperature was dropping rapidly. Telemetry from the Deep Space Network showed intermittent signal returns, as though Atlas were flickering in and out of radar contact. Within hours, its motion profile destabilized. Acceleration ceased. Rotation increased slightly, then stopped altogether. It was as if the drive, or whatever mechanism powered it, had shut down mid-burn. Tracking stations around the world scrambled to reacquire a fix, but by the time the James Webb Telescope came online for its scheduled scan, there was nothing left to observe. No light, no heat, no signal. 3I Atlas was gone. The rhythmic pulses flattened into silence. And then all at once, it vanished, not behind the sun, not from distance, but because it shut itself off. Within 11 hours, every signal ceased. The object went dark, cold, invisible. It was a fade out. It was a shutdown, a deliberate act, as if a machine had just completed its final task and powered down. But the silence didn't last. Weeks later, as trajectory models were recalculated, analysts noticed something unnerving. 3I Atlas hadn't continued outward into deep space as predicted. It had changed course. Ever so slightly, it began moving back toward the inner solar system. Its new path intersected a stable region between Earth and Venus, a region notorious for one other thing: satellite interference. At first, NASA dismissed it as observational error, but when Goldstone, FAST, and the Arecibo array all confirmed the same data, panic turned into paralysis. Because no natural object adjusts its own orbit. No comet hides in a blind spot. No piece of rock performs a maneuver, unless it was never meant to leave, unless it was meant to stay. Meanwhile, at MIT, a different discovery unfolded. An AI system analyzing Webb's spectroscopic data wasn't looking for elements, it was searching for patterns. And what it found changed everything. When plotted over time, the nickel and carbon dioxide emissions formed a spiraling helix, a twisting, recursive geometry. It wasn't random, it wasn't noise, it looked biological. When compared to early Earth RNA structures, the resemblance was haunting. Not identical, but eerily close, the same ratios, the same folds, like a template, a chemical blueprint. Not alive, but alive enough. What if 3I Atlas hadn't just emitted gas? What if it had been seeding code, molecular data waiting for the right planet, the right conditions to activate? And what if that planet was ours? During attempts to reacquire its signal, radar pings aimed at the object bounced back from an entirely different direction, the far side of the moon. The echo returned too early and modulated, a distortion carrying the same 7.2-hour rhythm as Atlas's light curve. Cross-checking older lunar data revealed something even worse. The exact same modulation had been recorded in 2017 during the passage of Oumuamua. Whatever this was, it had happened before, and now it was happening again. This wasn't a comet visiting a solar system. It was a system responding to itself. Maybe 3I Atlas didn't arrive to explore. Maybe it came to activate. And whatever lies buried beneath the lunar crust just answered. For 2 weeks after the blackout, the James Webb Space Telescope remained in forced silence, its instruments locked, its data feeds scrambled beyond recovery. Then, just as suddenly, it returned to normal operations, sliding back into its usual schedule of deep field observations. But the stars weren't normal anymore. Across multiple data sets, subtle distortions began to appear, faint rhythmic dimming, repeating in cycles too precise to dismiss as noise. 7 pulses. Silence. 7 pulses again. Different observatories picked it up next, from Chile to Hawaii to Antarctica, each confirming the same sequence, identical across constellations. When scientists overlaid the coordinates, the pulses didn't scatter randomly across the sky. They aligned. A perfect line. A narrow corridor carved through the void, tracing the exact trajectory of 3I Atlas. The discovery split the scientific community. Some called it a relay, an interstellar communication system awakening after eons of dormancy. Others whispered darker possibilities, a breadcrumb trail left by something searching for a signal or returning to a place it once knew. Still others suggested the pattern wasn't a signal at all, but a timing mechanism, a clock, a countdown. And then the moon changed. Seismic instruments stationed along the Sea of Tranquility began detecting microtremors, vibrations far too regular to be tectonic, echoing the same 7-pulse rhythm that shimmered across the stars. No impact, no quakes, just a soft, steady beating. Something beneath the lunar crust was moving. Whether it's a warning or an awakening, no one can say. But every 7.2 hours, the stars blink and the moon answers. But one truth has begun to settle over every observatory on Earth. The event isn't local anymore. It's spreading. And now we stand on the edge of something vast, something that's been waiting for us to look up. The James Webb Telescope didn't just find a comet. It witnessed the execution of a program, a sequence precise enough to bend gravity, echo off the moon, and stir the planet beneath our feet. 3I Atlas didn't send a message. It ran a check, a system test. And when the test completed, it powered down. Because maybe it wasn't meant for us. Maybe it came to wake up something else. So ask yourself, what if the signal wasn't an introduction, but a reboot? What if something ancient, something machine-born and star-old, just confirmed that the network still works? And now, it's waiting for the next step. Subscribe, because the next object won't knock. It won't announce itself. It will simply arrive. Turn on notifications, so when the sky answers back, you'll be the first to know. And tell us in the comments, do you think 3I Atlas marks the beginning? Or the continuation of something we already missed? Because sometimes, the scariest discoveries aren't the ones we make. They're the ones that have been waiting for us to look. Out here, every mystery is a mirror. The more we stare into the void, the more it starts to stare back. 3I Atlas may have gone dark, but its echo is still out there, whispering through the stars, waiting to be heard again. This is Spaceverse, where the unknown isn't just theory, it's waiting. Until next time, keep your eyes on the night sky, because the next signal might already be on its way.
reminder that while curiosity sparks discovery, it's truth that gives it meaning. The universe doesn't need exaggeration. Its reality is already far more extraordinary than fiction.